A peasant girl was abandoned by her father to die, until a knight found and rescued her. Snow falls over a ruined chapel. A starving girl is left alone, her father's footsteps fading into the dark. The church bell tolls, and silence swallows her cries. But then hoofbeats thunder on the frozen road. A knight reins in his horse, and in that moment, fate changes forever. He carries her to safety, defying whispers, defying scandal. Yet what seems like a simple rescue hides a dangerous secret. For the trinket she clutches is no ordinary charm. It bears the crest of a family condemned for treason. Now, in a world where scandal can ruin an entire house and mercy is counted as weakness, both lives hang in the balance. Will love and honor be enough to stand against the weight of blood and betrayal? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The January dawn broke bitter and gray over the northern countryside, painting the snow-crusted fields in shades of steel and pearl. Inside the crumbling roadside chapel, young Eleanor huddled against the worn stone wall, her thin shawl offering little protection against the merciless cold. Her father's footsteps had long since faded into the frozen morning, leaving only silence and the whispered fragments of psalms that fell from her blue-tinged lips. "The Lord is my shepherd," she murmured, her voice barely a breath in the frigid air. "I shall not want." The words trailed off as her mind drifted, memories of warmth and family blurring with the present's harsh reality. Her fingers, stiff with cold, clutched at the threadbare fabric of her dress. The clip-clop of hooves on the frozen road barely registered in her fading consciousness. Outside, Sir Alaric of Montrose guided his mount along his regular patrol route, his thoughts occupied with reports of brigands in the area. The horse suddenly snorted and danced sideways, ears pricked toward the ancient chapel. "Steady there," Alaric murmured, gathering the reins. But the horse refused to move forward, pawing at the ground with obvious distress. Behind him, his squire shifted nervously in his saddle. "Perhaps 'tis just the wind, my lord," the young man suggested. But Alaric had already dismounted, his sword hand ready on the pommel as he approached the chapel's weathered door. The sight that greeted him stopped him cold. A young woman, little more than a girl really, lay curled against the wall like a fallen bird. Her skin held the pallor of winter itself, save for the alarming blue tint of her lips. She stirred slightly at his entrance, eyelids fluttering. "Dear God," Alaric breathed, quickly striding forward. He knelt beside her, noting the poor quality of her clothing, the worn shoes, the traces of recent tears frozen on her cheeks. Without hesitation, he unclasped his heavy wool cloak. "My lord," his squire called from the doorway. "The girl is clearly a peasant. Think of propriety." "And propriety," Alaric snapped, carefully wrapping the girl in his cloak. "I'll not leave her to freeze." He gathered her gently in his arms, shocked at how little she weighed. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her out into the weak winter. "Sunlight, make haste," he ordered his men-at-arms. "Fashion a litter from spears and cloaks. We make for Montrose Hall immediately." As his men scrambled to obey, Alaric looked down at the girl's face. Something in her peaceful expression, despite her dire situation, stirred his heart with an unfamiliar ache. The journey to Montrose Hall seemed interminable, though his men made good time across the frozen landscape. Alaric rode beside the makeshift litter, frequently checking to ensure the girl remained breathing beneath the pile of cloaks they'd heaped upon her dot. As the sun began its early winter descent, the massive form of Montrose Hall finally emerged from the gathering dusk. Alaric's arrival with his unusual burden sent the household into immediate activity. Mistress Doretta, his capable housekeeper, took charge at once, ordering maids to prepare the small infirmary and send for the surgeon. "Poor lamb," Doretta murmured as they settled Eleanor onto the narrow bed. The older woman's experienced hands moved quickly, removing the girl's frozen clothing and replacing it with warm linens. "She's half gone with the cold, she is." The surgeon arrived promptly, his leather case clutched in his gnarled hands. "The usual treatment for such cases," he announced, preparing his bleeding implements. To restore the balance of humors, Alaric stood by the crackling fire, his jaw tight as he watched the surgeon work. Though he had his doubts about the bleeding, he knew better than to interfere with accepted medical practice. Instead, he focused on the girl's face, noting with relief that some color had begun to return to her cheeks. Mistress Doretta worked steadily, rubbing goose grease into Eleanor's frozen hands and feet with methodical care. The pungent smell filled the small room, mixing with the smoke from the fire and the metallic scent of blood from the surgeon's bowl. "She's young," Doretta observed quietly, her eyes meeting Alaric's across the room. "And alone. There's a tale here, mark my words." Alaric nodded grimly. "One we shall hear when she's well enough to tell it." He watched as the girl's breathing grew stronger, more regular. Each rise and fall of her chest seemed a small victory against the death that had so nearly claimed her. The truth of the situation settled over the room like a heavy mantle. A peasant girl, abandoned to die in a forgotten chapel, now lay rescued in the manor of Sir Alaric of Montrose. The implications of such an act, a nobleman involving himself in the fate of a common girl, would surely raise eyebrows among his peers. But as Alaric watched Mistress Doretta tend to the girl with maternal care, he found he cared little for such considerations. The fire popped and hissed, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls as evening deepened outside the manor's thick walls. In its warm light, the girl's face had lost its deathly pallor, though she remained deep in exhausted slumber. Alaric maintained his vigil by the hearth, his thoughts troubled by the circumstances that would lead a father to abandon his child to such a fate. Morning light crept through the kitchen windows of Montrose Hall as Eleanor stirred on her straw pallet near the hearth. The warmth of the cooking fire had chased away the memory of yesterday's bone-deep cold. Her nostrils filled with the homely scent of bubbling oat porridge, and her empty stomach cramped with need. "There now, child. Let's get some food in you." Mistress Doretta's firm but kindly voice drew near. The housekeeper helped Eleanor sit up, pressing a wooden bowl of steaming porridge into her trembling hands. "Eat slowly. Your belly needs to remember its manners." Eleanor spooned the warm porridge carefully, savoring each bite. After days of hunger, even this simple fare tasted like heaven's own feast. "Now then," Doretta said, settling onto a nearby stool, her capable hands never idle as she sorted through linens. "You've received Christian charity, and that's proper. But charity must be met with honest service in return. Can you so?" "Yes, mistress," Eleanor answered softly. "My mother taught me before she passed." Doretta nodded approvingly and handed her a torn tablecloth. "Show me your stitching on this, then." "Mind it's fine work, this goes to the master's table." Eleanor threaded the needle with care, her fingers steady despite their lingering weakness. As morning wore into afternoon, she worked diligently, her tiny stitches neat and even. The other servants passing through the kitchen began to pause, offering small smiles or kind words as they watched her patient labor. "The girl has a gentle way about her," Cook whispered to Doretta, "and those stitches would please any lady's eye." But the peaceful mood shattered when Lady Isabeau swept into the kitchen, her silk skirts rustling with disapproval. She had stopped at Montrose Hall to break her journey south, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. "What's this?" she demanded, her lip curling at the sight of Eleanor. "A beggar girl housed under a noble roof?" "Mistress Doretta, surely you understand the impropriety." Doretta straightened her spine. "Sir Alaric himself ordered her care, my lady. She was near death in the snow. Better that than risk scandal," Lady Isabeau sniffed. "A knight housing a peasant girl? Tongues are already wagging. I've heard whispers even in my brief time here. Eleanor's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept her eyes on her stitching. Each careful pull of the thread, a silent prayer for invisibility. The lady's words cast a pall over the evening meal. In the servants' hall, worried glances were exchanged over bowls of stew. "Sir Alaric's too kind for his own good," muttered the stable master. "The nobles won't stand for it." But what was he to do? Ask the kitchen maid. Leave her to freeze? Some would say yes, replied the butler grimly. Better that than court scandal. Above stairs, in the long gallery, where portraits of Montrose ancestors lined the walls, Sir Alaric stood alone in the gathering darkness. A single candle cast his shadow tall against the oak paneling as he broke the seal on a letter just delivered by messenger. The wind drove snow against the diamond-paned windows as he read the summons to court. His jaw tightened as he considered the veiled warnings in the carefully penned words. The king's secretary wrote of concerns regarding proper maintenance of noble households and the importance of maintaining social order. Alaric moved to the window, watching the snow swirl in the torchlight below. He had known this would come, had expected scrutiny the moment he lifted that half-frozen girl into his arms. But knowing made it no less troubling. His fingers crumpled the letter's edge as he remembered. Eleanor's blue lips forming prayers. Her courage in the face of abandonment. No, he would not cast her out to appease wagging tongues. If protecting one innocent life meant facing court gossip, then so be it. He was a knight of Montrose, and true nobility lay in actions, not whispers. But as he stared into the snowy night, the weight of unseen eyes pressed upon him. The real danger was only beginning, and he knew not all threats would be as direct as Lady Isabeau's sneers. A week had passed since Eleanor's rescue, and dawn painted the courtyard of Montrose Hall in pale winter light. Sir Alaric's carriage stood ready, wheels crunching on the frozen ground as servants secured his traveling chest. Eleanor watched from the kitchen doorway, her thin shoulders wrapped in a borrowed shawl. As the knight prepared for his journey to the capital, "Remember what I said, Mistress Doretta," Alaric called out, adjusting his fur-lined cloak. "The girl is to learn proper sewing under Madame Perrault's guidance. Let her earn her keep with dignity." The stern French seamstress stood nearby, her sharp eyes appraising Eleanor like a bolt of uncertain fabric. "Oui, my lord. We shall make her useful, n'est-ce pas?" As the carriage wheels creaked away on the icy ruts of the road, Eleanor found herself following Madame Perrault to the sewing room. The chamber was warm, but austere, filled with the whisper of needles pulling thread and the soft rustle of fabric. "You will start with simple stitches," Madame Perrault declared, setting a coarse piece of linen before her. "Watch carefully." Days blurred together in a rhythm of needle and thread. Eleanor's fingers, unused to such delicate work, bore countless tiny wounds. Each prick drew a bead of blood, but she refused to complain. In her needle roll, hidden from sight, she kept her most precious possession, a worn medallion, its surface dulled by years of worried touches. When Sunday arrived, Eleanor joined the household's journey to the parish church. Snow crunched beneath cartwheels as they made their way to services. Inside the ancient stone building, she took her place in the back pew among the cotter's tenant. Farmers and laborers who worked the surrounding lands dawdled as the congregation rose for the opening hymn. Eleanor's heart stopped. Across the nave, partially hidden behind a pillar, stood her father. Their eyes met for one searing moment. His face, gaunt and haunted, showed a flash of recognition before he turned and fled, leaving the hymn unfinished behind him. Meanwhile, leagues away in the capital, Sir Alaric found himself swept into the glittering currents of court life. In a chamber hung with tapestries and warmed by crackling fires, he was presented to Lady Beatrice, daughter of the Duke of Thornfeld. "Sir Alaric of Montrose," the herald announced. Recently returned from border patrol, Lady Beatrice curtsied with practiced grace. her green eyes showing intelligence beneath their proper modesty. "Your reputation for valor precedes you, Sir Alaric." Around them, courtiers exchanged meaningful glances. Whispers of potential alliances floated like perfume in the air. The Duke himself looked on with calculated interest. Back at Montrose Hall, evening drew its purple cloak across the sky. Eleanor walked home from Vespers services, guided by the guttering light of a candle stub. The ruined chapel, where Sir Alaric had found her, loomed beside the road, its broken walls stark against the winter stars. Something made her pause. The medallion hung heavy in her pocket, and on impulse, she drew it out. Its tarnished surface caught the weak candlelight as she stepped into the chapel's remains. There, on the ancient stone font, barely visible beneath years of moss and weathering, she saw a crest that matched the one on her medallion. Her fingers trembled as they traced the worn carving. Questions rose in her mind like birds taking wing, but she forced them back down. This was not the time for such mysteries. Tucking the medallion safely away, she hurried back to the manor, keeping her discovery locked silent in her heart. The tallow candle cast unsteady light on the snowy path ahead as she walked, her steps quick and quiet in the gathering dark. Behind her, the ruined chapel held its secrets in the deepening night. The kitchen at Montrose Hall glowed with hearth fire long before sunrise. Steam rose from iron pots as the cook prepared the morning's porridge. Eleanor stirred the embers with a poker, her fingers still stiff from carrying firewood. The sudden rap at the servant's door startled her. "God's blessing on this house," came a gentle voice. A travel-worn friar stood in the doorway, snow dusting his brown robes. His kind eyes crinkled as he bowed his head. "I am Brother Clement, seeking brief shelter on my journey." Mistress Doretta appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome, brother. We have hot broth to warm you." As the friar settled on a kitchen stool, Eleanor served him a wooden bowl of steaming soup. Her medallion slipped from beneath her bodice, catching the firelight. Brother Clement's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "That is an unusual piece, child," he said carefully. Eleanor's hand flew to the tarnished disc. After a moment's hesitation, she drew it out on its frayed ribbon. "I have had it since I was small. The markings, I saw them on the old chapel where—" She trailed off. Remembering the bitter cold of that day, Brother Clement set down his spoon and took the medallion with reverent care. His weathered fingers traced the worn crest. "This is the seal of House Valan," he said, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "A noble line attainted for rebellion against the crown 15 years past. Their lands were seized, their names struck from the rolls of nobility." He pressed the medallion back into her palm. "Keep this hidden, child. To be known as kin to traitors, even distant kin, could mean arrest." Eleanor's hands trembled as she tucked away the medallion. "I know nothing of my mother's people. She died when I was very young. I travel between the great abbeys," Brother Clement said. "Their records may hold answers. I shall search them when I return this way." He finished his broth in thoughtful silence. After the friar departed, Eleanor sought out Mistress Doretta in the still room. The housekeeper listened gravely to her tale, then drew her into a fierce embrace. "Speak of this to no one," Doretta warned. "Your place here is precarious enough. We shall wait for Brother Clement's return and pray for wisdom." Meanwhile, at court, Sir Alaric sat at his writing desk, candlelight flickering across fresh parchment. The scratch of his quill paused as he considered his words carefully. "My dear friends at Montrose," he wrote, "the capital grows wearisome with endless ceremonies and expectations. Their majesties have been most gracious, yet I find my thoughts turning often to the peace of home. Lady Beatrice, the Duke of Northfeld's daughter, is much praised at court. The king makes his wishes for an alliance increasingly clear." He sealed the letter with red wax, pressing his signet ring into the cooling pool. 3 days later, a post rider delivered it to Montrose Hall. Eleanor received it with the other household correspondence, her heart quickening at the sight of his familiar hand. That evening, she composed a careful reply. "Your servants pray daily for your safe return, my lord. Your kindness remains our blessing. May God guide your path in all things." She signed it simply with her initial, knowing even this much correspondence pushed the bounds of propriety. As night fell, Eleanor slipped into the manor's small chapel. Moonlight filtered through the lancet windows, turning the stone walls to silver. She knelt before the altar, drawing out the medallion that now seemed to carry such weight. "If my blood is curse," she whispered, her words barely stirring the sacred silence, "let my deeds be blessing." Cold wind sighed through the nave, making the altar candles flutter. The medallion felt warm in her palm, heavy with secrets yet to be revealed. The ancient stones seemed to hold her prayer as she knelt there, a lonely figure in the vast darkness. While beyond the chapel walls, the winter wind keened its mournful song through Montrose Hall's towers. 10 days had passed since the friar's visit when hoofbeats echoed through Montrose Hall's courtyard. The winter sun had barely risen as Sir Alaric dismounted, his cloak dusted with snow from the journey. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, speaking of long days at court and longer nights wrestling with royal demands. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Frost glittered on the bare apple trees in the walled orchard as Alaric walked beside Eleanor, their boots crunching on frozen grass. Behind them, Mistress Doretta followed at a proper distance, her warm breath visible in the winter air as she kept her dutiful watch. "The household runs well in my absence," Alaric said, his voice gentle. "Doretta tells me you've shown great care with your duties." Eleanor kept her eyes lowered, though her heart quickened at his praise. "I only did what was right, my lord. Your kindness deserved no less than my best service. Look at me, Eleanor," he said softly. She raised her gaze to meet his, and for a moment the winter cold seemed to fade. His eyes held a warmth that spoke more than words could safely say. Something passed between them, delicate as the frost patterns on the orchard wall. An understanding, a connection that needed no voice. "The apple trees will bloom come spring," Alaric said, breaking the charged silence. His gloved hand brushed a bare branch. "Even the hardest winter cannot stop new life from returning." "Yes, my lord," Eleanor replied, her cheeks pink from more than just the cold. "Nature keeps her promises, no matter how dark the season." Doretta coughed discreetly, reminding them of her presence. They continued their walk, speaking of simple things: the kitchen gardens, the spring planting, the repair of the chapel roof. Yet beneath their ordinary words flowed deeper currents of feeling, as steady and secret as an underground stream. That evening, as servants lit the candles in their wall sconces, a royal courier arrived at Montrose Hall. His boots were mud-splashed from hard riding, and the letter he carried bore the king's own seal. Alaric received it in his study, the firelight catching the grave set of his jaw as he read the message. The words struck like sword blows. The king expected, which meant commanded, Alaric to wed Lady Beatrice. The marriage would secure Montrose lands against border disputes, binding two noble houses in service to the crown. Each carefully penned line tightened the trap of duty around him. Alaric's fingers crumpled the parchment's edge before he caught himself. He smoothed it flat again, his movements deliberate and controlled. Though his heart ached to share this burden with Eleanor, he knew such confidence would only bring her pain. Better to bear it alone than risk her peace of mind. Later that night, Alaric stood alone in the long gallery. Moonlight filtered through the lidded glass, casting lattice shadows on the stone floor. He pressed his forehead against a cold window pane, seeking clarity in its bite. "Lord," he whispered, "grant me strength to keep my honor bright, though my heart grows dark." Below stairs, in the servants' hall, Eleanor sat by candlelight, mending a torn sleeve with tiny, careful stitches. The air felt heavy with unspoken words, as if sorrow itself had taken up residence in the halls of Montrose. Though she knew nothing of the king's letter, her heart sensed the change in Alaric's bearing. Like a bird feels an approaching storm, her needle dipped and rose in the fabric, each stitch a small act of devotion to the household that had become her haven. Yet even as she worked, something in her chest pulled tight, matching the tension she had seen in Alaric's face during their morning walk. Doretta passed by, pausing to rest a weathered hand on Eleanor's shoulder. The old housekeeper said nothing, but her touch carried comfort all the same. In the quiet of the servants' hall, with only the whisper of thread through cloth and the distant crackle of the kitchen fire, Eleanor continued her work, each stitch a prayer for whatever shadow had fallen across. Montrose Hall, the village spring fair, brought welcome cheer after the long winter. Church bells rang bright and clear across the muddy square as villagers and servants from Montrose Hall gathered around colorful market stalls. The morning air held a hint of warmth, and tiny green buds dotted the branches overhead. Eleanor stood in Widow Mason's cottage, carefully pinning the hem of a dress for one of the orphan girls who lived there. The child fidgeted but smiled as Eleanor worked, humming a gentle tune to keep her still. 5 more dresses lay waiting, each one lovingly mended from donated cloth. "There now, little one. Give us a turn," Eleanor said, stepping back to check her work. The girl twirled, her patched skirts flaring. "Perfect. Now run along and send in your sister." A shadow crossed the doorway. Brother Clement stood there, his brown robes travel-stained, a leather satchel clutched in his hands. His eyes held a mixture of worry and wonder as they met Eleanor's. "My child," he said softly, "I have news from the Abbey records." Eleanor's heart quickened. She excused herself from the widow and followed Brother Clement to a quiet corner of the village green. There, beneath a budding oak tree, he opened his satchel and withdrew several yellowed papers. "The medallion you showed me, it belonged to Lady Maud of Villaine," he explained, pointing to careful notes in monastery script. "When the house fell, she fled with her infant daughter. None knew where they went." He paused, studying Eleanor's face. "The timing, the location where you were found, you could be that child." Eleanor's hands trembled as she touched the papers. "But the Vallons were traitors," she whispered. "They chose the wrong side in a noble's quarrel." Brother Clement corrected gently. "But their blood runs true, and their line was known for kindness to the poor." A familiar step approached. Sir Alaric had noticed their conference. His face grew grave as Brother Clement explained his findings, but when he looked at Eleanor, his eyes held nothing but warmth. "Your virtue speaks louder than any ancient blood," he said firmly. "You have proven your worth through deeds of kindness, not accidents of birth." As afternoon faded to evening, Eleanor slipped away to the manor's chapel. Candles flickered before the altar as she knelt in prayer, trying to make sense of all she had learned. The door creaked softly. Alaric had followed. He knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "these past months have shown me what true nobility means. It lives in your gentle heart, your steady faith, your care for others." She turned to face him, tears brightening her eyes. "My lord, I am no one, perhaps worse than no one, if these revelations are true." "You are everything," he answered, taking her hands in his. "Everything I never knew I sought until I found you that winter morning. I love you, Eleanor, and I would make you my wife properly, with banns read and special license obtained, if you will have me." "I love you too," she whispered, joy and fear mingling in her heart. "But the court, your duties, let me worry about those," he said firmly. "Will you trust me? Will you join your life to mine?" "Yes," she breathed, and their fingers intertwined in a promise as sacred as any formal betrothal. Only Mistress Doretta, entering quietly to trim the chapel candles, witnessed their exchange of vows. She smiled and withdrew discreetly, her heart warm with hope for their happiness. But as darkness fell, a different scene played out in the steward's office. A royal messenger, mud-splattered from hard riding, handed over a sealed document by candlelight. The steward's face grew troubled as he read the order, a command to investigate any surviving kin of House Valan. His fingers trembled slightly as he set the paper down, watching the candle flame cast dancing shadows on the wall. The weight of this knowledge and the choice of what to do with it pressed heavily upon him in the gathering night. Dawn crept over Montrose Hall in pale fingers of light. In his study, Sir Alaric of Montrose held the royal inquiry in trembling hands, the parchment heavy with the weight of its implications. His jaw set with determination as he watched the sun rise through leaded glass windows. He would petition the bishop for a special marriage license and throw himself upon the king's mercy. Love and honor demanded no less. The steward's footsteps whispered down the corridor outside, but his heart harbored darker purpose. In his private chamber, quill scratching against paper, he penned careful letters to Lady Isabeau's circle. His words dripped poison, whispers of a traitor's daughter sheltered at Montrose, of a noble house risking all for a peasant girl with rebel blood. Below stairs, Eleanor worked at her morning tasks, but servants' whispers followed her like shadows. "Valan blood," they muttered. "The king's men will come." She paused in her sweeping, heart growing cold as winter frost. Through the scullery window, she watched a messenger gallop away, bearing the steward's letters. Understanding dawned like ice in her chest. She was bringing danger to all she loved. With trembling fingers, she wrote a note to Mistress Doretta. "I cannot bring ruin to this house. God keep you all." She left it folded by the kitchen hearth. Wrapping her thin cloak tight, she slipped away toward the priory of St. Betha, where she might claim sanctuary. By noon, heavy clouds rolled in, spitting needles of sleet. Eleanor trudged on, her shoes soaked through. When Alaric discovered her note hours later, his face went pale with fear. He ordered his fastest horse saddled, deaf to the steward's protests about propriety and scandal. "She thinks to save us by destroying herself," he growled, swinging into the saddle. The sleet stung his face as he galloped down the muddy road, scanning the hedgerows for any sign. There, caught on a thorny branch, a length of blue ribbon he recognized from Eleanor's hair. He turned his mount toward the path it marked. The Black Brook Ford lay ahead, its waters swollen with spring melt. Eleanor stood at its edge, testing the slick stones with one foot. The crossing beckoned, promising escape, but the rocks gleamed treacherously under their coating of ice. She took one step, then another. On the third stone, her ankle turned with a sharp crack. She cried out as she fell, barely catching herself before the current could sweep her away. The thunder of hooves approached. Through the curtain of sleet, Alaric appeared like a legend from old tales, his cloak streaming behind him. Without hesitation, he dismounted and waded into the ford. "My love," he said, reaching for her. "Did you think I would let you face this alone?" Eleanor's tears mingled with the sleet on her cheeks. "I would not bring destruction to Montrose. You bring only blessing," he answered, lifting her gently onto his horse. But as he turned toward home, torchlight flickered through the gray curtain of weather. A squad of royal officers blocked the road, their weapons ready. "In the king's name," their captain called, "we bear a warrant for the arrest of one Eleanor, suspected daughter of the attainted House Valan." Alaric's arm tightened around Eleanor's waist as he faced the soldiers. His voice rang with steel and conviction. "You shall lay no hand upon her while I live." The torches hissed in the sleet, casting wild shadows across drawn faces. Behind the officer's shoulders, Lady Isabeau watched from her covered carriage, her expression a mask of cold satisfaction. The warrant in the captain's hand dripped with rain, but its authority remained absolute. Yet Alaric held firm. sheltering Eleanor with his own body, ready to defend love against both crown and custom. The morning sun cast long shadows across the solar's wooden floor as Eleanor sat in her confinement. 2 royal guards stood outside the heavy oak door, their presence a constant reminder of her predicament. Mistress Doretta bustled about, arranging pillows and ensuring the fire burned bright against the lingering winter chill. "There now, child," Doretta murmured, pressing a cup of warm tea into Eleanor's cold hands. Sir Alaric rode out at first light. He'll not rest until he reaches the bishop's palace. Eleanor's fingers traced the rim of the cup. 2 days' journey in this weather. I pray he rides safely. Through the leaded glass windows, she watched the last of his escort disappearing over the frost-covered hills. Sir Alaric carried with him Brother Clement's testimony about her lineage, letters from the local parish vouching for her character, and his own passionate plea for their marriage. The hours passed slowly. Doretta kept Eleanor's hands busy with mending and embroidery, though her thoughts constantly strayed to Alaric's dangerous journey. The guards changed at noon, then again at sunset, their boots echoing in the corridor outside. Meanwhile, Alaric pressed his mount through muddy roads and late winter sleet. He barely stopped to rest, driven by urgency and love. When he finally reached the bishop's palace, his cloak was heavy with ice and his face windburned from riding. The bishop, a man known for his wisdom as much as his piety, received Alaric in his private study. Candles flickered as Alaric presented his case, speaking of Eleanor's gentle spirit, her devotion to God, and the pure love they shared. "Your Grace," Alaric said, kneeling before the elderly churchman, "I ask not only for a marriage license, but for your support in seeking the king's mercy. Eleanor's blood may carry the taint of rebellion, but her heart holds only goodness." The bishop studied the documents, his expression thoughtful. Brother Clement's careful research into the Villain lineage proved compelling. More moving still were the testimonies from villagers speaking of Eleanor's kindness to orphaned children and her humble service at Montrose. "Rise, Sir Alaric," the bishop finally said. "Your petition speaks of true Christian charity. I shall write to His Majesty on your behalf." He drew out a parchment and began drafting the marriage license. "However, you must settle a proper jointure upon the lady. She must not be left destitute should misfortune befall you. I would give her all I possess." "Your Grace," Alaric replied fervently. Back at Montrose, as dusk painted the sky in deep purples, a cloaked figure slipped through the kitchen gardens. Mistress Doretta, recognizing Eleanor's father despite his gaunt face and ragged clothes, quietly led him up the servants' stairs in the solar. Eleanor's heart nearly stopped at the sight of him. He fell to his knees before her, his body racked with sobs. "My girl," he choked out. "My own dear girl. I left you to die because I could not feed 5 children through winter. The little ones were failing. I thought... He could not continue. Eleanor knelt beside him, tears flowing freely. "Father," she whispered, taking his rough hands in hers. "I forgive you. Only promise me one thing. Care for my brothers. Let them grow strong and good. I swear it," he vowed, pressing her hands to his wet cheeks. "The spring brings work. We'll not starve again." After her father's departure, Eleanor stood at the solar window. Far below, torches marked Alaric's progress as he rode toward the capital, carrying the bishop's license and letter. The night was clear, stars pricking through the velvet sky like distant candles. "Come back to me," she whispered, her breath frosting the glass. "Come back safe." Her fingers found the medallion beneath her bodice, no longer a burden of shame but a testament to survival and hope. Behind her, Doretta quietly tended the fire, her presence a comfort in the long hours of waiting. Together they would watch and pray and trust in God's mercy and a good king's wisdom to unite 2 hearts that beat as one. 4 days had passed since Alaric's departure from the bishop's palace. Now he stood in the grand chamber of the royal residence, its dark wooden panels gleaming with candlelight from dozens of brass sconces. Heavy velvet curtains hung motionless in the evening air as three powerful men decided Eleanor's fate. The king sat in his carved chair, his face illuminated by dancing flames as he examined the pile of letters and testimonies before him. To his right, the Lord Chamberlain's quill scratched quietly against parchment, recording every word. The bishop's envoy, a dignified man in purple robes, stood near the hearth, his expression thoughtful. "Your Majesty," Alaric began, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I present these testimonies from the village priest, the local magistrate, and my own household, all attesting to Eleanor's virtue and gentle character." The king's fingers traced the red wax seals. "You admit freely that she carries Valene blood?" "I do, sire." Alaric drew himself up tall. "She is likely the child of Lady Maud of Valene, spirited away when that house fell. But I ask your Majesty to consider, can a babe choose its bloodline? Eleanor has lived a life of pure virtue, earning love through kindness, not birth." The chamber fell silent save for the crack and pop of burning logs. The Lord Chamberlain's quill paused, hovering above the page. "She was found half frozen in a chapel," Alaric continued, his voice softening with memory. "Not plotting rebellion, but praying psalms as life slipped away. Since that day, she has served others with grace, teaching orphan girls to sew, tending the sick alongside our housekeeper. These are not the actions of a traitor's heart." A gentle rustle of silk drew all eyes to the chamber's entrance. Lady Beatrice stood there, her blue gown catching the candlelight as she curtsied deeply to the king. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and kind, "might I speak?" The king nodded, and Lady Beatrice approached with measured steps. "I have heard much of this Eleanor, and of Sir Alaric's devotion to her. While some suggested I might claim offense at his choice, I cannot." She smiled softly. "True nobility shows itself in actions, not merely blood. I gladly step aside, knowing his heart has chosen wisely." Alaric bowed deeply to Lady Beatrice, touched by her gracious words. The king leaned forward, studying the lady's serene face. "You release any claim to Sir Alaric's hand without rancor?" "I do, your Majesty." "Let love guide where duty might have bound." The king sat back, drumming his fingers on the arm of his chair. The candles flickered as if holding their breath. "Sir Alaric," he said at last, "your steadfast defense moves me. Lady Beatrice's generous spirit speaks well of all involved." He reached for his seal. "Let it be known that we grant full clemency to Eleanor of Valene. The lands once held by that house remain forfeit. Her person is pardoned of all taint of rebellion." The Lord Chamberlain's quill flew across the page as the king continued. "The bishop's license for marriage is approved, conditional upon a proper jointure to protect her future." Alaric's heart soared as the king pressed his great seal into warm wax, making it official. "Your Majesty shows true wisdom and mercy," he said, bowing low as the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky. Alaric's carriage rolled out of the palace gates. Summer rain fell steady and soft as they began the 4-day journey home. At each post house where they changed horses, Alaric handed letters to waiting riders, messages of hope racing ahead to Montrose Hall. "My dearest Eleanor," one such letter read, "Take heart. Mercy flows like healing waters. Our dawn approaches." The carriage wheels turned steadily northward through the rain, each rotation bringing Alaric closer to home, to love, to the future that mercy had granted them. The late summer sun streamed through the great hall's windows at Montrose, casting long shadows across the gathered household. Mistress Doretta stood before them all, her hands steady as she held the king's letter. The royal seal gleamed red in the afternoon light. "By His Majesty's grace," she read clearly, her voice carrying to every corner, "full pardon is granted to Eleanor, born of House Valene, in recognition of her proven virtue, and the steadfast testimony of Sir Alaric of Montrose. The guards who had kept watch over Eleanor these past weeks removed their helmets and bowed respectfully before departing. Throughout the hall, whispers that had plagued the household for months fell silent at last. Eleanor stood quietly beside Alaric, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. 3 days later, the special license arrived by royal courier, wrapped in velvet and bearing the bishop's seal. The household burst into joyful preparation. Garlands of late summer flowers appeared in every doorway, and the kitchens filled with the warm scent of baking bread and roasting meats. In her small chamber, Eleanor wrote a letter to her father by candlelight. "Dearest father," she penned carefully, "know that you have my forgiveness, freely given. Please accept this purse of silver for my brother's care." She sealed it with a drop of wax, trusting Alaric's messenger to deliver both letter and coins safely. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright. Against all custom, but by Alaric's firm wish, villagers and servants filled the chapel alongside the local gentry. A murmur of delight rose when a courier arrived breathless with Lady Beatrice's gift, a delicate lace veil that caught the light. "Like morning dew on cobwebs, her ladyship sends her warmest wishes for your happiness," the courier announced. And Doretta helped arrange the precious lace over Eleanor's dark hair. The ceremony proceeded with quiet dignity, the priest's voice strong as he pronounced the holy words. No banns were called, the king's license granting special permission for their immediate union. Alaric's voice never wavered as he spoke his vows, his eyes fixed on Eleanor's face with unwavering devotion. "As my solemn pledge," he declared before all assembled, "I grant unto my wife the manor of Sweetwater Vale as her jointure, to be hers in perpetuity." A ripple of approval passed through the witnesses. It was a generous provision, ensuring Eleanor would never again know want. The feast that followed filled Montrose Hall with more joy than its ancient walls had known in years. Musicians played from the gallery, while servants and villagers danced together in the courtyard. Laughter echoed from every corner as platters of food circulated freely among all guests, regardless of station. The summer air grew heavy with the scent of herbs and roasted meats, sweet pastries, and fresh bread as twilight painted the sky in soft purples and golds. Alaric led Eleanor to walk among the fruit trees of the walled orchard. The evening air was sweet with ripening apples, and distant music still floated from the hall's open windows. "I would restore the chapel where I found you," Alaric said softly, his fingers laced with hers. "Not as a monument to that dark day, but as a sanctuary for travelers who might need shelter, as you did." Eleanor squeezed his hand, drawing him to a stop beneath a heavily laden branch. From a pocket in her wedding gown, she withdrew the medallion that had led them to this moment. Together they walked to the orchard wall where a small niche had weathered into the ancient stone. "Once abandoned, now cherished," Eleanor whispered, pressing the medallion into the niche where it fit as if made for that very spot. Behind them, candlelight began to glow in the hall's windows, calling them home. The warm light spilled across the orchard grass like a path of gold, leading them toward their future together. If something in this story whispered to your spirit, stay a while. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. The next story may be the one you didn't know you needed.